You're now watching Sports Bettors Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone. It's the last of our Power Four. We're going to get used to saying that, Power Four instead of Power Five. As we break them down from a handicapping perspective, let's get right to it. A lot of sizzle in Boulder, Colorado, to say the least. What a start. Hey, Coach Prime, you can't start showboating, peacocking after one win, okay, down in Fort Worth. So it's a long season, and they really got derailed down the stretch. Not so much of the win total, Paul, but you've one of the more memorable games. That's right, Colorado State, the Rocky Mountain Showdown. For the first time since 1996, it's on campus in Fort Collins, Colorado. Remember last year, plenty of action in that double overtime, 43-35 Colorado win when Coach Prime kept taking the ball first on in overtime. That's a flaw. But Colorado State, the Rams are catching 7.5 at home, Paul.
Yeah, I tell you, that Colorado State game last year, Colorado State leads most of the game, actually led 28-17 midway through the fourth quarter. Then Colorado rallies, of course, forces overtime and ultimately wins that game in double overtime. And as you mentioned, this year's Rocky Mountain Showdown on campus in Fort Collins, Colorado for the first time since 1996. Jimmy, they've played most seasons, not all seasons, but most seasons since 1996. Of the last 24 meetings since that time, 19 have been played at neutral site Denver. 5 of those on Colorado's home turf there in Boulder. So you've got to expect that the Rams are going to be excited to finally get Colorado and Coach Prime there in Fort Collins. You know, there's a couple of things I really like about this game. Not only that, but I believe the scheduling spot also strongly favors Colorado State. You've got a Colorado team that's going to be coming off of a game against Nebraska, a real big game. They're going to be about a touchdown underdog in that game. A lot of certainly stakes on the line in that matchup. And then the next week, Colorado will have their first ever Big 12 game, a home matchup against Baylor, waiting in the wings. So they're going to have a lot of anticipation for that first ever Big 12 game as well. Meanwhile, Colorado State, the week before playing the Buffaloes, they host FCS Northern Colorado. And then the week after playing Colorado, they face lowly UTEP, one of the worst teams in the FBS. So I think the scheduling spot, again, favors Colorado State. Colorado State is a team that throws the football, and Colorado's kind of their Achilles heel. They're not very good defensively, period, but certainly their Achilles heel is the back of that defense. Last year, if you remember, Colorado State just torched them in the secondary. Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, he throws for 397 yards. And Torrey Horton, this guy's one of the best wide receivers in college football. Doesn't matter if it's group of 5, power 5, Jackson 5, whatever 5. This guy can play. 16 catches, 133 yards, and a touchdown last year against the Buffaloes in that disappointing loss. I just think Colorado State's going to bring the kitchen sink. I think they've got a talented offense. I think they can, score for most of the game. Toe-to-toe with Colorado. I like the Rams plus 7.5 over Colorado there at Bet Rivers.
It'll be a great atmosphere in Fort Collins for that game after last year. A little war words between the two coaches as well. A little bit of everything. Let's move on. And a little double barrel shot here for you. That's right. Both Paul and I both like the Oklahoma State Cowboys to make the playoff. Well, it's plus 900. At Bet Rivers to win the Big 12 is plus 700. That's real simple. If they win the Big 12, they're going to get into the playoff. That's an automatic. So take that extra $2 on that price right there. Oklahoma State, you may remember, they got handed pretty good to them, but they still made it to the Big 12 championship game. 19 or 20, depending on what depth chart you look at, returning starters, including 15 seniors. Age helps. Whether it's college basketball or football, it helps. And how about their offensive line? Tackle to tackle, and Ollie Gordon comes back. Ollie Gordon, a little NIL cash, and the whole offensive line returning. Bowman should improve. Their quarterback should improve that 15-14 touchdown to interception ratio. And Gundy in its 20th season in Stillwater. It's been eventful, to say the least. First year, had a losing record. 19 straight winning records. 18 straight winning records going into his 20th season. 18. So, man, it's his alma mater. He got it when Les Miles bolted for LSU in 2005, and he's been there ever since. So, Oklahoma State, Paul, we both like them. Fill in the cracks here on me, plus 900 to make it to the playoff.
Mike Gundy, like him, love him, or loathe him, Mike Gundy's just a guy who seems to get more out of less year after year. I mean, his teams tend to just be undervalued. It's like we never learn our lesson. This is a team, you look at the last 3 years in the Big 12, and of course Texas and Oklahoma were part of that Big 12. Oklahoma State has the best record in the Big 12 the last 3 years at 19-8. You look at the last 5 years, they're 30-15. The last 10 years, 57-33. Second to only Oklahoma over that 5-year and 10-year span in the Big 12. So even better than Texas. So this Oklahoma State team just gets it done year in and year out. You look at this schedule, they're only a clear-cut underdog in one of their games for sure, that being a late September trip to Manhattan when they play Kansas State. They're currently a 5.5-point underdog in some of the game of the year markets in that one. They're currently a 1-point home underdog to Utah the week before that on September 21st, but they figure to be the betting favorite in their 10 other regular season games. They are going to be probably favored by a touchdown or less in 5 other conference games, so they do have some losable games. This is a very balanced Big 12. I think 7 or 8 teams have a legitimate chance to win this conference. But again, this Oklahoma State team, you look at their last 21 regular season games, and I think this demonstrates Gundy's coaching ability. Over the last 21, Oklahoma State's won 7 games outright as the betting underdog. During that same 21-game span, they've only lost 3 outright as the betting favorite. So it's always good to be on that side of the ledger. As you mentioned, Oklahoma State, arguably the most experienced team in all of college football. They just return everybody on offense, basically. You mentioned 1,700-yard rusher Ollie Gordon II. Brennan Presley last year had 991 receiving yards, so just a touch shy of a 1,000-yard receiving season. Alan Bowman back for his 7th year. The 5 returning starting offensive linemen, a key contender for the Joe Moore Award. You look at their offensive line, Jimmy, and a lot of these guys had starts at other schools, but 214 career starts represented on the offensive line, averaged 28.6 points per game last year. I think they're closer to 34 or 35 this year. I not only like Oklahoma State to go over the regular season win total of 8 at minus 177 there at Bet Rivers, but I'm there with you. We get the value at plus 900 to make the playoff. I think that's a good price on Oklahoma State. I like the Cowboys.
And there is a chance that, they can not win the conference and still get an at-large bid to the playoff as well. So it makes absolutely no sense. But if they win the Big 12, they're in automatically. Makes no sense not to take it. I know that jumped out at you as well. So over 8 wins also, and probably the toughest game at home in Stillwater, and that is against the Utah Utes. Getting them away from home certainly does help. But, man, yeah, we like bad offensive lines returning intact. But that's a recipe for success with over 200 starts in their career. All right, Paul, let's move on to one that I like. And, look, I like climbing. I like Kansas State. I like what the young quarterback did in an abbreviated time last year. Some see that Will Howard, he might not even started in Manhattan if he didn't go to Ohio State. But still 6-3 is not bad in a conference with a lot of balance and a lot of depth. Keep in mind that two games that feature Big 12 teams are non-conference. To maintain their contracts with these teams, Baylor and Utah. Baylor at Utah is a return trip, so they're going to honor that, but it's not going to count for Big 12 standings. Same thing with Arizona at Kansas State. So Kansas State 6-3, still 7-2 in this league is going to be tough. And so there's a lot of things I like about Kansas State, but 6.5 is a big number in this league with a lot of depth, a lot of balance. I like under 6.5 Big 12 wins, minus 112, Paul.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you mentioned that we've talked about it, I think, before on the podcast as well. This is just such a balanced Big 12. There's so many teams that are just right there grouped together. And Avery Johnson in that audition last year looked, very athletic. I know they're excited about him, a big-time recruit to keep there in the state of Kansas. But I'm like you. It's going to be tough to go 7-2 in that Big 12. So I'll certainly be pulling for you. It'll be interesting to see how that comes out. And they have a few losses on defense as well.
How about and one of the teams that we're not going to talk about because we don't have a pick, but I have to talk about because has anybody done a better job than Lance Leipold in Lawrence, Kansas? I mean, and you look at their start, they don't have it's all juniors and seniors, all of them. They're starting 22, and their two deep is really old as well. This is a similar. The reason I bring it up, it's a similar depth chart of what I identified last year with Duke. When they had the great run. And, man, look, they had Notre Dame beat, and then they got Riley Leonard hurt. But and we, you cross your fingers with Daniels to stay healthy. But Kansas is just getting better in this league, and that's another team that is going to, when you got teams like that up and down the conference, it makes it for, of course, Kansas and Kansas State will always play in that rivalry. But that's a team that is high quality as well in this league.
Yeah, I mean, for Kansas, it's going to be about two things. It's going to be about Jalen Daniels' health. If he's healthy, I mean, that offense, that's a top 15 national type offense. They've got weapons all over the field. They got to get better on defense. That's obviously the weaker side of the ball. But they're just one of a number of teams, like you mentioned in the Big 12, that could possibly even, if things fell right, win it. And they'll certainly have a role in who does win it. So, Daniel's health, you want to see him healthy. You want to see everybody healthy. Hopefully he's good to go, and Kansas likely to play a whole lot of high-scoring football games this year.
The thing that kind of cooled me on Kansas a little bit, it's and look, defense, yeah, it's all about players to me, 90% about personnel. I've seen enough defensive coordinators look really good and look really bad, depending on the talent that they had in those particular years at whatever school they were. They're renovating their stadium. So they have recognized, hey, they got a little something here. They're renovating their stadium, and they're going to be playing either at a soccer stadium or at Arrowhead Stadium. So that not having that on-campus home field advantage is something that you have to remember when you're looking at the Kansas Jayhawks this year. Let's move on to another one that you like, Paul. The Arizona State Sun Devils, one of the new members of the Big 12. 3-9 last year in Kenny Dillingham's first season there, and just still dealing with some of the sanctions left behind by the Herm Edwards era. 5 of the 9 conference games on the road, either play 4 or 5, depending on it, with a 9-game conference schedule. And 2 of those 4 home games, team we just talked about, Kansas and Utah. So this is a tough schedule. The conference wins over-under at Bet Rivers is 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this Arizona State team, and Arizona State 6-18 the last 2 years straight up, but only 4-18 versus FBS teams, and they only play FBS teams this year, I believe. I believe they're even worse off this year. I hate to say that, but I believe they're worse off this year than last year. They lose arguably their best offensive and defensive players through the portal. Wide receiver Elijah Badger, who had 135 catches for 1,579 yards over the last 2 seasons. He's off to the University of Florida. And then defensive end B.J. Green, he had 6 sacks and 11 quarterback hurries last year. He's off to Boulder to play for Coach Prime and Colorado. And then additionally, you've got a cornerback, Ed Woods, who was regarded by Pro Football Focus as one of the best corners last year in the Pac-12. He's left for Michigan State. So they're losing a lot of their top players. Defensively, they only have 3 of their top 11 tacklers back. So that's never a good metric there. And then offensively, they only averaged 17.8 points per game last year, only 322 yards per game. So they're really struggling to move the ball. Not exactly an explosive bunch, to say the least. And then you look at their 8-game Big 12 schedule, which is what we're talking about here in this particular handicap. They've got home games against Kansas, Utah, UCF, and BYU, and then road trips to Texas Tech, Cincinnati, Kansas State, and Arizona. So a very difficult conference schedule there for Arizona. As it stands today, Arizona State only figures to be favored in one conference game by my numbers, -2.5 at home against BYU. So they might not even be favored in that game. They could be an underdog in all of their conference games. So I just think it's going to be a long year for Arizona State. I think they're going to be under 2.5, -118 in their 9-game Big 12 schedule.
All right, so Paul is going under the 2.5 conference wins, Big 12 wins, -118 available right now at Bet Rivers. Here's one that both of us like, or not like as far as the team is concerned, but Dave Aranda, after a 3-9 2023, is definitely under some pressure. I don't know if this is the best schedule to navigate and maintain his job. Just 2021 won the whole thing. That's right, that goal line stance against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game, and then a Sugar Bowl victory against the Ole Miss Rebels. Matt Corral got hurt early in that game, but they still won it. So they redid his deal, but 3-9, and here we go. 5 road games in conference play. Play either 4 or 5. That's not good. And tack on that non-conference return trip to Salt Lake City to play the Utah Utes. We hadn't touched on the Utes a lot, but they are definitely a big factor in winning this conference this year as well, with Cam Rising coming back for a 17th year, whatever it is. The craziest thing, he has another year of eligibility after this year, but he's already said that I'm not doing that, so I'm going to move on. But anyway, 5 road games plus at Utah, they could lose 6 games right there, maybe go 1-6 there. But and in home games, Air Force, Oklahoma State, Kansas, TCU. This is a brutal schedule. 5.5, 5-7 might be pretty damn good for the Baylor Bears this year. We both like the under, which is -134 at Bet Rivers right now, Paul.
Yeah, I tell you, Jimmy, it's just amazing to remember that just a few short years ago, Baylor won the 2021 Big 12 championship with that narrow victory over Oklahoma State there with that goal line stand. So, man, they have fallen quickly. I've got a prop for you here. Will Dave Aranda be Baylor's head coach on September 1st, 2025? I would make the yes about +140. I think the no's the favorite at about -170. Like you mentioned, this is a very difficult schedule that the Bears face. First of all, I like to, be transparent and give my full viewpoint. I like the upgrade at quarterback, what I consider to be an upgrade anyway, bringing in DeQuan Finn from University of Toledo.
Yes. Yeah.
He's been there 5 years, but over the last 3 years is really when he's played. Former Offensive Player of the Year there in the Mid-American Conference. Passed for over 7,000 yards in his career. A true dual-threat guy. He's run for over 1,800. And I think he's an upgrade over Blake Shapen, who leaves for Mississippi State. So I like that. He's another great quarterback in a league full of really good quarterbacks. So that's a league that's another dimension to the Big 12. It is a quarterback league. You got some really good ones there. But unfortunately for Finn and Aranda and anybody associated with the Baylor program, I just think they lack playmakers and difference makers, not only on offense, but on defense as well. You look at this defense that's been in a steady decline since that championship season of 2021. In 2021, they give up an average of 18.3 points per game. They gave up 26.8 in 2022. And then last year, they give up 33.3 points per game for the season. So not a very good effort there by Baylor. You look at conference games only last year versus Big 12 foes, they gave up 36.8 points per game. So basically 37 points a game. They're going to be better on defense this year, Jimmy, but I don't think they're going to be that much better. So I think it's going to be another long year for them. You look at that schedule, again, always a critical component of these regular season win totals. They've got home games in the opening month against Tarleton State, Air Force, and BYU. And then other than those 3 games, there's at least some possibility that Baylor won't be favored in another game all year. They do have a home game against TCU and a road trip to Houston. Both of those look like virtual toss-ups. So even if they split those games, they win the 3 that I mentioned in September, split those 2 that I just talked about, they're still only at 4 wins. Hard to see 2 more wins against that schedule. I think it's a tough go for the Bears this year. I like the under 5.5 regular season wins, -134 there at Bet Rivers.
Speaking of Dave Aranda, also, former neighbor over here in the Baton Rouge area, they will be beating down his door if he is not retained at Baylor as a head coach for a defensive coordinator position. You know, as the new age athlete kind of doesn't respond as much, more that in-your-face sort of motivational tactics. He was always sort of he's called a mad scientist, kind of chill, always got his points, and the players did respond to him. So they will be beating down his doors if it does not work out in a head coaching capacity. Still, always remember coming in the neighborhood that Baylor football 18-wheeler. I said, that's a nice perk to come move all your stuff. So coming in here and moving on. I do want to touch on, and I want your opinion, how much confidence do you have in Cam Rising that he is going to be healthy in for this season after – I mean, with this time last year, we're like, I don't know. Well, he didn't take a snap. I don't know anybody that would have bet he wasn't going to take a snap completely the whole season. But, man, he is so good when he came in after a first couple of losses early and led them to that narrow defeat in that classic Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Man, he is really good at executing that offense. You think he's going to be healthy?
I'll say, first of all, Cam Rising's 2023 season or non-season is kind of a case study of why the sports betting community wants transparent injury reports, because they were basically saying he was questionable every week from the season opener to the end of the season. Right. And, of course, basically till the end of the season, he never touched the field. And I hear people like you and I and other pundits out there in the space talking about Utah as if Cam Rising's just coming back with guns a-blazing and he's 100%. And certainly that's the hope, and that could be the case. But with this type of injury, the fact he hadn't played a football game, I guess, in 20 months now, you have to have some reservation. I mean, what we do, to me, is all about probability, and there's a much greater probability that he's somewhat less than 100% than he is at 100%. So I unquestionably have some reservations about Cam Rising, and something to think about. He's a runner. That guy is he is a real threat in the running game. Is he going to run as much? Even if he's physically put together and he has confidence in that knee, is he going to be as apt to take off when the opportunity arises? Right. I certainly could see there being some hesitation there, because you've got self-preservation, whether you're on a football field or driving on an interstate highway, that's your number one priority. And I think there will be some of that as well. So I wonder if he loses any of that dimension as a runner. You have to be watching closely and concerned about Cam Rising's health. Yeah,
and he's a true dual threat. He can execute. He does a great job at an option game. If you remember that that Pac-12 championship team, that classic game in Salt Lake City against USC, how'd they win on that two-point conversion? With his legs. So that's a very good point there. And I just want to clarify as well, two of the quarterbacks we talked about, Jalen Daniels at Kansas and DeQuan Finn now at Baylor, they're true dual threats. Sometimes dual threat is code for runner. No, these guys, they both throw in. They're both a threat to run with their arm and with their wheels. So you're right, Paul. They do have a lot of really good quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year. Let's go to my last pick, and that is the Houston Cougars. Now, a lot of people, big transition. They fire the coach. They bring in Willie Fritz from Tulane. It's going to be transition. A lot of people picking them near the bottom. Okay, but 3.5 wins, minus 150 available right now at BetRivers. Willie Fritz has been a head coach for 27 seasons. Central Missouri, Sam Houston State, Georgia Southern, and Tulane. He has one losing season. Well, what happened that season in 2021? Well, Hurricane Ida slammed the Gulf Coast in August 29th. It started where they were going to actually host Oklahoma in their first game. They had to move, and they narrowly lost in Norman. But he gutted his staff, didn't care for how a lot of the staff, but they had to relocate to Alabama. It was just a complete mess. Yes, an asterisk there on the extenuating circumstances. I'll take them. Well, they got home games against UNLV and Rice. Okay, they can win those. And then 10 other games. I'm just going to go with my man Willie Fritz here. He's a winner. And this is going to be a transitional year. Next year, the year after, should be better. But doggone it, man, Paul, he is a winner. I'm going over with the Houston Cougars, 3.5, minus 150 at BetRivers right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable what Willie Fritz has done as a head coach. He's one of the, kind of old-timers. He kind of does it his way. He doesn't he didn't worry about some of the things that other coaches might be focusing on. But he's a football coach, an old time football coach. He wins football games. I like their quarterback Donovan Smith. I do have some concerns about how their roster stacks up against the rest of the Big 12. But the argument that you made just based on his history, losing's not in his DNA. With one season of having a losing record, and you pointing out the extenuating circumstances surrounding that season, it's never a bad idea to bet on Willie Fritz. So it'll be interesting to see what the Cougars do in his first season there in Houston.
All right, we get to talk about games next week as well. So that's the 4 major conferences this year. Next week it'll be the best of the rest and all the mid majors. I know Paul Stone's got a couple hidden gems in there on the mid major programs in independents, and then week 0 picks next week, and then we get a full slate after that. Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott on the Sports Bettors Paradise, talking college football on the Bet Rivers Network.